Hi, my name is Mary Jabalisco and welcome to our latest video. What we will be doing in this video is painting the featured painting together step by step. Be sure that you have read through the material and you've assembled your supplies. If you need any supplies, you can of course go to kingsland.com and we'll be happy to send them to you. So get out your materials and let's get started. The brushes that you see on the screen are the brushes that we'll be using. Different types of brushes. One, filberts, and the filberts are really great for painting of flowers. Notice the shape of a filbert is very similar to that of a flat, except it doesn't have any corners to it. And one thing about a filbert also is that it just echoes the shape of a flower. So it's just a great brush to use. These brushes are short versus long-haired filberts, but the filament is very soft but springy, so it doesn't flop around or go limp. So it's a great brush to use for oil or genesis, wherever you need a brush that's a little bit more fuller bodied. The next set of brushes over mops, and what a mop is used for is it's a refining tool. It's to smooth an area that you want extremely smooth. We'll use it to smooth out some areas of the painting, maybe go back to a pivot point. You can also take the mop and you can pounce with it, going up and down, and that'll blend a stubborn blending area, and it'll also add a surface patina if that's something that you're looking for. Then the next brush is over. This is a script brush and this is a detail brush. The script brush is great for making lines. What you do with this brush is you load it fully, and then the back of the brush acts as a reservoir, and then the tip actually feeds the paint. And so you'll have to work with the correct consistency of paint. And you use this quite a bit, basically to draw lines or any kind of line work. Sometimes I use it in little small areas. And the same with this little 3/0 detail brush. Some people claim that I'm interested in painting an entire painting using this brush, and sometimes I think that I do, but it is great for shines or for getting in little teeny tiny corners, and you can even flatten it and make it into a very small flat. Great for water drops. And then this brush is a large flat, and it is used for basing in a large area. Personally, I like this for maybe working in large backgrounds. Anytime I need to fill in a large area, this big flat is just a must. But in general, I like to use the filberts for applying the paint because you don't get the chisel edge marks. So these are the different types of brushes. These are all from the Majestic line from Royal, and the filberts and the mops are part of the Kingsland Jabalisco Signature series, all available at kingsland.com. This painting that we're going to do is off of a photo I took when my husband and I took a really great trip to Red Cloud, Nebraska. We went there because it's the home of Willa Cather, and we wanted to know a little bit more about our most famous author from Nebraska. And along the way we saw just so many beautiful rural scenes, and I just was intrigued by this one. I just really loved the clouds that day, the orange versus the blue, such a great compliment. All of the hay rolled up, just all of those round objects going against all of the square objects in the field. So I just thought it'd be a great way to start working on some landscapes and exploring all of the theory behind that. And so go ahead and get your canvas ready. I would suggest a portrait grade, and let's go ahead and we're going to just start right in on the clouds. When you're thinking about a landscape, what you don't want to do is divide your canvas or surface right in half. So even if your photo reference is different, you probably want the sky to be 2/3 and the land 1/3, or the opposite. But just definitely don't put your horizon line right in the center. And the other thing, the photo that I took, it was a little, the horizon line wasn't straight. And so I went back and I straightened it up and made sure that my horizon line was just parallel to the bottom of my surface. So, it's great to have reference material, but you do have to work with it and make sure that it's, what you want. I'm starting off, I have Phthalo Blue 5, and I'm starting up at the top, and I have Phthalo Blue 5, and right next to it on my palette I have white, and I usually mix a value scale, but in this case I'm going to just work with brush mixing back and forth, and the idea is that way there'll just be a lot of variety of tones. If your paint won't move, pick up a little bit of thinning medium or terp to make it move. Now this looks very, very intense, and that's okay to just have some of the areas. I'm grabbing my terp, that's that crazy noise. It's okay to have the blue intense in a few areas. You wouldn't want to have an entire sky this color. So you do have to watch whenever you work with intense colors that they're in small, small areas. And so this is, again, I'm going to have this be this beautiful summer blue sky that we enjoy here in Nebraska. I'm going to have that up at the top, and it will end up being a pretty small area. I'm using a Sabletech filbert. You could use a softer filbert. I just like this one because I can be a little bit, I don't know, a little rougher with it because it's a little bit stronger makeup. I've picked up more white, coming down and starting to have just a little bit lighter cloud areas. I would love to be able to do clouds all in one pass, but that isn't how I'm able to do it. So if you're able to put in the clouds in one go around. But what we're doing is the clouds that are very, very light will be put on last. We're in essence doing the clouds that are back behind the very, very light clouds. And so again, just picking up a variety of white and the phthalo blue. I want the clouds to end up being horizontal, generally horizontal. So I will go back and make sure that that happens. I also want every area to be very blended looking. We can go back and make stronger cloud shapes, but it's pretty difficult to go back in and make less blended. In other words, stay on the side of vague at this point. To keep moving down, I think I'm going to pick up a little bit bigger brush. Okay, I have my bigger brush. I think that's going to make this a little bit easier. Just want to do this kind of slip-slap method so that you end up with undefined horizontal shapes. If you want to give it a little bit more of a cloudy look, you can pick up some grays. I never seem to have perfectly clean brushes, so I think I picked up something right in here, and I don't mind it. I'm just going to go ahead and leave it. Again, picking up a little bit of the paint thinner just to help this move. Another thing to keep in mind is there is perspective that's involved in this piece. The main perspective is that as things get farther away from us, to give an illusion of distance, we make things smaller. And so the clouds that are up in here are actually closer to us than the clouds that are down here at the horizon line. These are the ones that are very, very far from us. I'm going to go ahead and go back to kind of a brighter color. And these clouds, again, to give it the look of distance, these clouds are going to be smaller and less defined than the ones up in the top section. And we haven't gotten very defined anywhere at all yet. And this is when you want to say to yourself, is this a painting of clouds or a painting of hay bales? And so I think it's kind of a painting of hay bales. So I did not make the clouds perfectly defined, just because I wanted what was, in my opinion, the important part, the hay bales, the kind of the product of all of that labor. I wanted that to be the main focus. But I do want to have some clouds down in this area, and to give them the look like they're pretty far in the distance. I'm not going to have any right at the horizon line because that is so far away from us that we wouldn't see them. But as we go up on the canvas, up in the sky, they'll get a little bit more defined. And again, this is just the first stage of these clouds. We're working from the back forward. And so these are the clouds that are way in the back, the dark section. And I would say at this time, all you want to have is just the look that everything's going horizontal. The brightness would be up at the top and near the horizon line where the sky and land meet. Nothing super defined yet. If you have any slight definition, it will be at the top of the clouds. Now you have an option of drying this before we move on to the land, or letting it dry. Let's just go ahead and now we're going to add in our field. I went ahead and marked my sections tan, green, a little bit of tan, a little bit of green, because when I was just looking at it I found it pretty confusing, let alone painting it. But I'm starting off by filling in the first section with just raw sienna. You can blend ever so slightly where it meets the sky, because in general we're going to have either trees back there or hay bales. You can keep it crisp if you want, but I guess if you blend it, it's not a bad thing. As things get farther away from us, they get blurrier, and that's because we're seeing things through the layers of atmosphere, and that's called atmospheric distortion or aerial perspective. And what that means is that things that are close to us, we're seeing them through not very much atmosphere, clouds, etc. So they're pretty clear. But then as things move away from us, they get grayed out, they get lighter, less distinct. Okay, we'll move down and fill in that next little section. And there's some undulation here because of what's going over these fields is some green areas. But you do want these to, at this moment, still look horizontal. And then there's just a little bit of this raw sienna tan color showing here. And I used a great big T-square to make sure that this stayed perfectly straight. And so that's a suggestion. We definitely don't want our horizon line to be crooked. And again, even if your photo reference is crooked, doesn't mean that you have to paint it that way. And I'm coming in with basically black that has a little bit of yellow in it to make an extremely dull green. And I still had some of the raw sienna on my brush, so it's kind of picking up some of that brown, which is okay. And again, these areas I definitely want to blend together. And I'm doing that just by dragging my brush and letting those areas meet. Then I think I'll put a little bit of a division here just to retain that. And then I'm going to fill in the bottom all the way to the end of the canvas with this color. I'm going to start to work some of the different lines in for the field. I'm going to start off with just a little bit of that green. And I think what's interesting is that right about here, it's if the field was plowed in a different way. And so this gives us a chance to explore going back to a vanishing point, because all of these lines, we know that in reality they're parallel to each other, but we're going to pull them back toward a vanishing point on the horizon line. It's actually off the picture plane. It's on the horizon, but it's off the picture plane. We can't exactly see where that is. These lines are relatively, again, they don't have to be perfect, but they are, we want them to be parallel to the horizon line. As they get closer to the horizon line, if we were to put in many of these lines, they would start to get closer together. And again, that's another way that you can show perspective in a piece, is by rows such as this. They start to get closer together, similar to what happens with our clouds. Just a little bit of blending. Let's add just a look up a little bit of the grass, and then we'll be ready to add our hay bales. Coming back with just, thought I'd do this before I dried it, coming back with just a little bit of a lighter green. What I actually did is I took and brush mixed some yellow into the black green mix, coming in and adding the look of the grass or whatever this foliage might be. Just giving it kind of that windswept look, like it's curving over. Up on the chisel edge of a filbert. You can use a flat for this as well. I like working wet into wet because it gives such a nice kind of a soft and blended appearance. The disadvantage, of course, is that things kind of sink in, but that's what that second stage is for, coming back and making things a little bit more distinct. So just giving it a little bit of a roll and a curve in the middle of those greens. So let's go ahead and dry this, or allow this to dry. It's a lot of wet paint, and then transfer on the bales of hay, and we will paint those. Starting on this largest hay roll. Through the center section, I'm placing raw sienna with a little bit of white. I want it to be lighter than the field, and also by putting some white in it, it makes it just a little bit more opaque. Raw sienna by nature is fairly transparent. I'm laying this color in, and as you can see, I'm following the overall form of this cylinder. I'm going to make it a little bit darker, picking up burnt umber. We want the top of it to curve away from us, and the way to make that happen is by putting some dark up in that top section. A little bit of burnt umber on this side as well. And while blending, I'm going to pull it just a little bit, again following the curve of this is really just a big cylinder shape. I want to blend it, and then going back. And we'll, as anything that you paint, we're going to be creating form, and then we'll go back and add the detail. This side, this is a closed cylinder, so this side is fairly dark. And we'll give it the look of the rolled up hay. again in another stage. Picking up white that has a little bit of yellow in it, and try to get a little bit lighter through the center. Probably won't hold, but give it a try. Up on the tip of the filbert. Since I have a little bit of leftover paint, I think I'll start to give it that rolled look. Again, blending by following the form, and then when it kind of gets too much texture for at this stage, coming back and just giving it a little bit of a smooth. And these don't look like much until we, of course, add the texture and shadows. I'm going to paint another one, and then the rest are pretty redundant, but I'll paint this larger one in the middle, mainly because it's facing the opposite way. Repeating the same steps, starting off with raw sienna plus white to make it lighter and more opaque than the field. And I'm picking up a little bit of burnt umber at the bottom and also at the top. And you don't want to have more of the burnt umber at the bottom than the top. It would just be darker in the lower section. And just as before, coming back in the center. Coming back in the center with white plus raw sienna, strictly for form and a little bit of texture. And curving the brush around to show the roll. And if it looks too textural at this point, is where you want to give it a little blend with your brush. That is how all of the rolls of hay are done at this stage. But we do need to add in the back, there are a few distant trees, and I'm just using the same green, that same black green that we used in this area, and adding some distant trees. And because they're so small, they appear in the distance. I have a few over here as well. These go right on the horizon line. You can add these in using that same green. And I think the next step is obviously to finish up all these hay rolls, or rolls of hay, and then we'll come back and start adding all of our details. Starting back in the sky section again, adding the white bright clouds that wouldn't hold before. And what you want to do is, again, have the top of the clouds a little bit defined. Strive for variety. What you don't want is clouds that are exactly the same. Just want to make sure that you have a lot of variety, and they'll be unified because they're all clouds. Again, relatively horizontal. And I have white that just has just a dot of yellow in it. I'm losing the bottom of the clouds by scrubbing. And keeping my brush, it's not up like a pencil, it's kind of flat, so that when I scrub, the vast majority of the bristles are making contact with the surface. Now if you have an area that just won't scrub away, or it just looks too choppy, that's when you come in with a little bit of the phthalo blue, cerulean blue if you're using traditional oils. And then that helps just blend that in to what we've previously placed. What I really like to do is come back in a few places and add real bright blue sky. To me, that just says summer sky when there's just that real bright blue peeking through. Again, what seems to really work is having that brush laying back, circular motion. And different pressures will give you different illusions. Try having a lot of paint on your brush, and then there might be just some residue left, and by just working with that residue, then you'll make some different kinds of, I guess those are called cirrus clouds. I'm somewhat building on the clouds that I laid on initially, but you can build some new ones if you didn't get enough to begin with. And your clouds will be different than the clouds that I developed. It just, again, a lot of times it just depends on how much paint you have on your brush at a particular time. I think I'll let the clouds kind of rest for a little bit and move on to another section and see if I need to add more. Just kind of want to keep the painting all at the same level. So let's move down to the fields. I always feel like I just kind of repeat the same steps. But I guess that's kind of the idea, is that we repeat the same steps and increase the darkness, not everywhere, but just somewhat in the middle. I'm trying to let the dark that I laid down initially still be on both sides of this dark. Starting to increase the dark underneath each of our hay bales, I guess we could call them. I'm also getting darker on the actual cylinder shapes. Again, strengthening the original dark on our hay. This would probably be a good time to start adding in some dark that gives it the look of concentric circles. Just like anything, these will cast a pretty good shadow onto the surface, the field that they're in. I'm using black that has a little brown in it to create these shadows. I've laid in the darks, and now I'm scrubbing at them just a little bit to make them look like mounded up dirt rather than just a dark area. Then next we'll go in and add the look of maybe some hay that's still left in the field. Let's start adding some lights. I've gone back a bit of white, and this is really just a dry brush. Tapping my brush for a little bit of texture. I want it to be the lightest, you know, kind of toward the front of the composition. Again, you just wouldn't see the detail in the light as it gets farther back. Adding more light, the raw sienna plus white, right in the center of what we did initially. And of course, the ones that are closest to us are going to have the most detail, but they all need, you know, a little bit more attention. It might take a little bit to build up these lights. Whatever looks chalky or too white, that means you've gone too quickly and you need to drop down in value. I'm going to come in again with the raw sienna plus white and start adding the look of, you know, a little bit of the hay that's been left in the field. I'm just up on the chisel edge of my brush. I thought that looked a little too whitish, so I'm picking up a little bit more of the raw sienna. Picking up a little bit of yellow also. I think I'll switch to more of a chisel edge brush to start getting some more exact lines going. If any of the lines just appear too light or just too apparent, knock them down a little bit with your finger or with a brush. We're not very, very close to this landscape, so you're not going to see a lot of detail. we have to add some of this just to be interesting. When I went back and looked at my photo, I realized that there needed to be a fair amount of little pieces of hay coming off these bales. So this is where you'll come in with raw sienna plus white, maybe a little bit of yellow. I think it's probably best to do it on kind of these front three. Maybe even this one has a little bit showing. You could come in with a liner also to get some of this texture going. You could even come back with some dark to create some additional lines. Sometimes if you can't get it, the light to show, which I was feeling like that's what was happening, what you do is you come in with some dark. And one thing that I noticed on my photo that I thought was, I don't know, just added a lot of warmth and life, was just as always there's a turning color where the dark and the medium meet. So I'm coming back in with just a whisper of red, and it'll just give it just some life and some warmth. You can actually put this on all of the hay bales. I think our Nebraska landscape is just about finished. I think maybe a little bit more texture on the hay bales. Maybe a few more clouds. I'll have to let it sit a little bit and decide. I hope you've enjoyed painting this kind of quick little landscape and learned maybe a few things about perspective, and atmospheric perspective, and aerial perspective. So I think I'll add a few more dark areas in the grass. I'll add a few more dark areas in the grass, and then, like I said, let it sit for a while and see what else it might need. But
I think I'll let it sit for a while, see what else it might need, just as always. And I think I'm going to enjoy painting a few more of our pictures that we took on our trip across Nebraska. So go ahead and finish it up, and we'll see you next time.